Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to season 2 of Conversations in Pop Culture. And before I introduce my guest, I do want to remind everybody there are links up above. There is Dinny Grayson, who is my guest. Patreon link is up there, so please go support there, as well as I have 2 links for myself up there as well. Buy me a coffee and a Cash App link. So if you're feeling generous, feel free to support all 3 of those links. And if you want to even go beyond that, what I appreciate more than anything else is liking, sharing, commenting on this episode in this podcast. So feel free to do that. And so without further ado, obviously welcome to the show, Dinny Grayson, who is a cosplayer.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, guys.
Yeah,
So
no,
excited.
I am very excited because you are actually from the Philippines, and I've never interviewed somebody from the Philippines, and I do like to go international because I know a lot of American cosplay, but I am very curious how you got into cosplay because it might slightly be different than how we do things in America.
Yeah, I think it might. So I actually started cosplay out on a whim. I know that sounds ridiculous since I kind of do it full time now. But there was this smaller like anime convention. I wouldn't say it's as big as the conventions you guys have over there. But our conventions also last like a span of 1 or 3 days. And my friends were all going and they were cosplaying. I didn't even know what that meant. They just said they were like dressing up like Halloween, but it's not Halloween, but it's just an event. um, so I went with them and I was like a regular person. I was just carrying all their things, taking their pictures. It was a lot of fun being like their handler. I actually enjoyed that a lot. But they had convinced me that on the second day I had to join them in costume. And I had like, like a Halloween costume lying around, like a costume that I wear for costume parties specifically. And so I tried it out and then I just got hooked since then. So yeah, that's how I started.
So there's a few things I want to talk about right there. So obviously in America, we go big at anime Comic Cons. There's a bunch of small ones too, but obviously New York Comic Con, Anime Boston
Yes.
is big. Awesome Con in DC, obviously WonderCon, San Diego Comic Con, Emerald City, C2E2. And so I don't know how a Comic Con, Anime Con looks like in the Philippines, and I'm super curious about that.
Okay, so this is where it's like incredibly different. I know like in the United States, you guys also have like convention seasons where they all kind of happen like in the span of a few months. Over here, we actually, well, before the whole pandemic and lockdown, now obviously there's no conventions anywhere. Um, but before that, I would say every single month there would kind of be a convention. It would be, some of them would be smaller, some of them would be bigger. But for the big conventions, we just have like an events place, so like a convention center. I would say it is nothing compared to your convention centers over there. I would say it's like 1/10 of like a San Diego Comic Con, and that's already like our big ones. But for these smaller ones, we actually hold our conventions like in malls. I feel like that sounds kind of strange, but we have it in like the top level of the malls, and like you'll see like regular people going out to lunch. But then at the same time, you're gonna see like random people in costume and in super colorful wigs walking around, and like you can just see normies just go like, what's going on? But yeah, that's how it is over here. We have them more often. And as for the big ones, which will probably be small to you guys, um, they happen random parts of the year. Like we don't have like a convention season. Usually there's a convention happening almost like every quarter of the year.
And then obviously, I think we're going to dive into that in a little bit here, but I do want to ask you about what was that first cosplay that you got in the second day, because I am super curious. And obviously, that
So
was the hook for you, and you caught the
yeah,
bug,
it was.
obviously.
So funny enough, my very first cosplay was Sucker Punch. It was Baby Doll from the Sucker Punch movie because I what happened was I had a costume party and my friends were going all out. I still did not understand that cosplay was a thing. They were just like, "Oh, we're getting wigs for the costume party and blah blah blah." And I was like, "I don't want to look dumb." So I went and got like a the baby doll costume. I think I had that custom made for the party, and then I got like a wig. So I actually had the entire ensemble sitting in my closet for about a year. And then my friends, remembering that I had one, were like, "Oh, you gotta wear that." So I wore baby doll for the very first time in my very first convention. Didn't really make sense in this. It was like an anime convention, but I mean, I that's all I had, and it was fun. It was fun.
And then obviously, and I think I'm going to ask this in 1 second, but I do want to talk about inside baseball. And so obviously you have gone away from building or ordering a cosplay to now building some cosplays, building accessories. But I am curious, where do you get your ideas from and your inspiration from? Because the creative process is super interesting. Every cosplayer is different on how
Yes.
that works out for them. So what is yours?
Thank you. So I would say my like the way that I work with cosplay, I was a huge like academic nerd growing up. Like I love doing research, I love writing papers, like all the boring stuff that like students hate, I would love it. So I kind of approach cosplay the same way, where I like to do just a lot of research before making like a character. Like I will sketch out the costumes, I would draw things. So I like following creators who share their progress with the world, like Kamui Cosplay and Kinpatsu Cosplay. Those two, I really look up to them with how they, share their process. They have a bunch of YouTube videos and things like that. So I am super inspired by other fellow creators from all over the world. And yeah, like I just love learning. I think that's one thing that is part of my creative process. I will try anything once, and if I suck at it, then I guess I suck at it. But like if I don't, I can just keep doing it and working on it and stuff like that. Because when I started, obviously, I was getting my costumes made because I didn't know anything. I didn't even know how to work a sewing machine. In fact, when I got my very first sewing machine, I read the manual from cover to cover to learn how to use it.
So to go off of this, because this is super interesting, and obviously there's a whole debate in cosplay between, you know, buying your cosplay and then making it
Yes,
yourself. And I personally don't care as long as whoever's happy, because cosplay was meant to be fun, and it still is
exactly.
meant to be fun in a lot of ways. And so, but actually understanding how to order what you need and ordering a cosplay is a complicated thing to some degree because you have to know your body measurements, you have to know what fits, you have to know materials, and obviously you started out ordering things, and I know that you order some stuff still that
Yes, I
somebody
do.
might make for you, and then you might make half the cosplay and somebody else. So what is that like? Because ordering is an art in of itself, and it also
That's the
is
thing.
economical sometimes to order something. I'll give a very quick example. You have a uniform My Hero Academia cosplay. I'm pretty sure that one was ordered because it doesn't make sense to build their standard uniform. It
Yeah.
was cheaper to order it versus building it, and I don't think any cosplayer has ever built a uniform for My Hero Academia.
Yeah, yeah. I would agree with that. So when it comes to ordering, I go to like a few of my favorite stops. So I have some local resources, very cheap. They basically, I wouldn't say they're even custom. It's kind of, if you're familiar with Taobao, it's basically like a Chinese eBay, and a lot of cosplayers get from there. I know some people from like the United States also try and get from Taobao. But over here in the Philippines, it's really easy, even if you don't understand Chinese, because we have what we call like Taobao resellers who basically like you just show them like a cosplay, and they'll be like, okay, let me look for it for you on Taobao, and they'll like do the whole thing. Like they'll do the shipping, they'll do the everything. So it's really just like a service that they do, and usually. how they do it is they have like a Facebook page, and then they would do like batch orders so that the shipping is also not as expensive and stuff like that. So that's like ordering here locally. But when I order like it from international stores, um, that's another kind of hullabaloo because um, shipping internationally can be just so difficult. And I usually have problems with sizing as well. Like I don't know if you've ever heard of like American sizing and Asian sizing, and that like they're drastically different. Like case in point, I remember buying my Aunt Takamaki from Persona 5 like Panther suit. I bought it off of a very popular website called Mick Costumes. And I got it in an extra small. I was like, yeah, this is it. This is what I'm gonna do. And I received it, and I kid you not, it was like 2 or 3 sizes too big on me. So I had to like completely alter it. But also the reason why I bought it was because there are some materials that are really hard to find here in the Philippines and just really expensive to get like as yards of fabric. So like that type of lycra liquid reflective kind of shiny fabric material, it's kind of hard to find here at the moment, which is why I decided to buy the Panther suit from a store, whether or not it would fit me, because it would just be so much easier to alter it than like having to try and find that fabric to make the costume.
And to even talk about that, because that's one of the biggest problems with cosplay, and from my point of view, is that finding materials, substituting materials, making sure that you're balancing your costs, because cosplay can get very expensive very quickly. And obviously in the US, finding all that and doing all that is in effect. And in the US, we have an abundance of materials in a lot of ways. But what was that like during COVID? Because obviously, I don't know what the Philippines looks like, but I know that in Australia and even in the UK, people were struggling a little bit for a while with materials. And a bunch of cosplayers didn't have materials. And a bunch of people that I know did have materials because they bulked up and they saw the writing on the wall a little bit. So what was that like for you? Because you are in another country. And I know that in America, we have an arts and crafts store every 5 miles.
Wow, that's awesome. So
More or less.
yeah, that's so cool. So during the whole pandemic, I was actually really fortunate enough that I'm one of those people who kind of just hoards fabrics and materials and stuff like that. Also because by the time the lockdown happened, I had already started doing cosplay full time. So I made sure to have a stock of fabrics for any case like, oh, I need something for a cosplay all of a sudden. But I do understand that, especially when the pandemic first started, everyone was just kind of losing their footing and like trying to figure out how to do things. We have this service here in the Philippines that I literally live off by right now. Um, it is called Shopee, which is basically like Wish. I would say it's the closest thing to Wish in the States. So it's a really like cheap store. A lot of local sellers use it. A lot of local stores just gather there. It's basically like a website where you can buy almost anything. And their business completely boomed in the pandemic. They were able to like take all the precautions, do it safely, package things safely, deliver things safely. And as far as I know, like all my cosplayer friends here in the Philippines as well, that is how they get their materials now. It's through like this little uh service, which is like Wish in the United States. And that's how I think so many people are living off. That's how so many fabric stores are living off right now. They have to sell it online. And luckily, I think the selling process is so much easier with this service called Shopee compared to having to like make your own website and then selling it from there and stuff like that. So that's how we have survived as cosplayers at the moment.
Well, I'm glad that you survived, because I know that in Australia there's a bunch of people who we're doing okay, and they're doing it more as a hobby, and it's an aggressive hobby for them. But they're like, hey, I can't find EVA foam, and it sounds crazy because obviously I'm not a cosplayer, And so I've never built anything with EVA foam, everything that I want, and I'm in the comic side of things. I haven't had a difficulty finding anything I need, but I can imagine that it can get very, very complicated. But I do want to table all this, and I have a feeling we're going to dive into some of it. But I do want to start talking about your cosplays. And there's a bunch of
Okay.
different areas we're going to start with here. We can go into, and I'm going to start with Disney because I think that's the safest bet here. And so obviously, let's talk about Elsa because you have an
Yeah,
Elsa,
I do.
and you have two different versions of Elsa. I think I'm going to get the name wrong. I think your dress by the first Elsa was done by Frank Bojor. I want to say. I think
Yeah, it's Franco Barrio. There we go.
there we go. I wasn't going to get it. I wasn't going to get
It's
it.
fine. Totally fine.
I admit defeat when I know I'm defeated. But you also made the shoes and the wig. And so what was that like? Or you styled the wig, I believe. So what was
Yes, I
that
did.
like when you to Elsa, and what was that like building it out and saying, hey, I'm still, because this was early on in your cosplay career. And
Absolutely.
still, though, it's the idea that you made part of it and then somebody else made the other part of it and it worked.
Yeah. So, how we approached Elsa, I this was very, very early on. I would say Elsa was one of the costumes that I started cosplaying with. It was in 2014, if I'm remembering things properly.
Yeah,
um,
2014, yes.
yeah. Okay. Awesome. And basically, we have this amazing fashion designer friend who is Franco Barrio. Actually, he works with us now in our little like creative space. We have something called Melting Pot Studios currently. It holds my working area, like my workshop. My brother, who is a crafter for cosplay props and stuff, Jello Grayson, he has his workshop there. And then we have the studio of our fashion designer friend, who also made my Elsa gown that time, which is Franco Barrio. But before we would go to him in his old studio, and the one thing I asked for my mom on my 18th birthday, because in the States, I believe like when you're 21 or when you're 18, like most people like get a car or they go drinking and stuff like that. I would say here in the Philippines as well, like normal people will like go out and go to like clubs and things like that, but I've never been a fan of that. And here in the Philippines, we actually have something called a debut, which is like a debut, but we call it debut. I don't know why we say it that way. And it's basically like the Mexican quinceañera, but instead of it being on 15, it happens when you're 18. And usually, like people have like this huge party and stuff like that. And I was like, I don't want that. I don't like people. I want a costume. And Frozen had just come out the year prior, and I was like, I want to be Elsa. So instead of having like this huge party, I asked my mom if for a gift I could have a dress instead, and it was going to be made by Franco. So that's what happened. And then I made sure that I wanted everything to be like really accurate. So I made the shoes myself. And then I got the wig and I styled it for the first time. I still remember how that wig looked like. It wasn't pretty, but that's what I had in the beginning. But yeah, it was really fun to collaborate with like such a passionate person as well on something that meant a lot to me at that time. So yeah, it was really cool.
And obviously, I mean, Frozen is big out there in 2014. It still is. It's still referenced in a lot of ways. And people love Frozen. And so obviously, designing the shoes, styling the wig, obviously, you have somebody designing the dress, but you're putting it all together and you are building out a cosplay in a lot of ways. And so, what was that like, really building out your first, quote unquote, first like professional cosplay, if you will?
Uh, yeah, it was really, really fun. I was doing cosplay, as a hobby that time. I was still like studying and stuff like that. So I just wanted to be her. I didn't think that this was gonna like I was going to do birthday parties and attend events with Elsa and things like that. Like I had no idea. It was not my intention. But when I was making the costume, I just really wanted to bring her to life. That's kind of how I see cosplay. I think the best understanding of how I approach becoming like a character is kind of the people in Disneyland, the character actors there, where I don't want people to like meet me. when they go to like an event. I want them to meet like the character. And especially with Disney characters, I think with the whole like Disneyland idea, it was always like that. So that was my attempt with going into making Elsa. So that's why I wanted there to be like a level of accuracy with the costume, because I wanted like these little kids that I would see out in the convention floor to be like, oh my god, it's Elsa and stuff like that. So and interact with them as Elsa and things. So yeah, that's why I would say like making that costume was honestly like magical, because I am me as a person is very far from Elsa. Like I am not royalty. I am not regal. I'm very clumsy. But like transforming into that like level of elegance that Elsa is, and in like she's such a powerful character, and like to share that vibe and that energy with other con goers, and with especially like with kids that you would see running around and stuff, it was really fun.
And then obviously there's a few different versions of Elsa. You did another version, and this version was more gala oriented Elsa, and then the other version was almost more. And I think I say this very nicely. It was a little bit, I think, less gala, if you will.
Yeah.
Is a nice way to put it. And so, what was that like though to get to re-examine and do a different version? Because obviously, it's kind of nice when you get to do a similar concept but do a refresh on it, and then go back and sort of do it yourself. Because I have a feeling you built this Elsa for the most part by yourself at this
Yeah.
point. The
Yeah.
second Elsa.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's making sense, but the second Elsa, but there's still only one Elsa. I'm confusing
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah. No. It makes complete sense because in the second movie she has like a different outfit. I actually really love doing that outfit because, first of all, like I'm just the type of person who hates dresses. I've always have been. I've always felt like uncomfortable. But obviously, if it's for a cosplay, like I completely detach myself from that. But I will say it was just really difficult to wear that like intricate gown in a convention or in a birthday party, because kids would step on the cape, they would trip on the dress. You would drag it all around like the dirty convention floor. I know that sounds gross, but that's what it was. Whereas her in her second outfit in the Frozen 2 movie, I did the one where she was wearing like pants and there's nothing really draping on the floor. Just a bit with like her little like cape thing, but overall it was just a much comfier costume to wear as well. It was um and I think the reason why I liked it more as well is because I made it myself. By this time, I was doing like I made costumes by myself, like a couple of them before doing this one, and it was just nice to, make something from scratch and figure things out. And honestly, it was just the pants. The pants were awesome. Having to wear
And
pants as Elsa.
and to even go further off of that, because one of the things that's going on in cosplay is this idea of comfortability. I don't know if that's a real word, but it's this idea that people want to be comfortable in their cosplays now, and that it's great to have something that's so accurate and elegant, but people also want their cosplays to be durable at the same
Yeah,
time, because you're at a con, and well, cosplays can be very sensitive. And so obviously people don't want their stuff broken. They don't want things, tripped up, and cons aren't exactly the cleanest place. And so what is that like for you? Because obviously that gala version of Elsa, which is what I'm dubbing it at the moment, whether
right.
you like my dub or not, that's okay. But it's this idea that that is definitely more of an elegant higher end product than the second cosplay, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that that first dress, like it was a gown made by an actual fashion designer, so I still have it. I take very good care of it. But we did have to do a couple of repairs because, you see, when I did Elsa, it was the boom of Frozen. Like as you said, Frozen is still like relevant to this day. I can't believe it. But in the Philippines especially, like I don't know how many birthday parties I attended as Elsa. I did a bunch of like events for malls and like meet and greet Elsa, and it was me and things like that. So it was insane. It is the costume I've probably worn the most. So we definitely had to do like a lot of repairs on it. I had to stitch up the cape a couple times because kids would really like just trip on it or like rip it in half and stuff. Because when you're going in a convention, it's kind of easier because you can hold up the cape and stuff. But when you're in a birthday party and you just have to like mingle with the children, of course something is gonna happen. Like it's inevitable. So a lot of repairs has obviously gone into that. And luckily, we still work with Franco and stuff like that. So it was really easy for him to just come in and like fix something up and stuff like that. So yeah.
And then obviously, I want to back out of Frozen. And I do want to talk about Judy Hopps. I'm not too sure if
Oh,
that's
yeah.
Disney, but we're going to talk about it anyway because I think Disney has a stake in this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They do.
And I have somebody who's coming on who's really big into furries, so I'm going to send this to him. He's going to appreciate it on a
Oh,
lot of
that's so
levels.
cool.
And so, obviously, for those who don't know, Judy Hopps is a furry. She's a cop. It's super interesting. She sort of looks like Jill Valentine a little bit.
She does.
So, and it's like Zootopia, right? Which is even
Yeah.
worse. So it's like, and I know you worn this one a lot too. And obviously, lots going on with it. You've done stuff with Nick Wilde, who also is your partner in crime, and he was
Yeah.
judging some stuff in cosplay. So what was this all like doing this and building this up? Because obviously this is a very interesting cosplay.
It is. It was a really fun costume as well. And I actually did so many iterations of it. And when I say iterations, obviously there's only one Judy Hopps and there's only been one movie, so she only looks like one thing. But I remember when I first did Judy, I had silver hair, so I didn't wear a wig. I used like my short silver hair because I liked the idea that she had like really short hair, like as a cop, because she wouldn't have to tie it up or whatever and things like that. So I would do Judy Hopps kind of often. I actually, speaking of your friend who like was a furry fan, my friend and I, who was my Nick Wilde, his name is Yui Aquino, pretty popular cosplayer. I think he's also known over there in the States. Um, we judged a competition, and that competition was actually for a furry convention. We were invited as guests, and we also judged their cosplay competition, and that was really fun to kind of see a different part of cosplay because I'm sure that the furry community is another kind of subculture on its own, and it was really interesting to see just another type of convention with all these different kinds of people. Obviously, it's still similar people to the cosplay community because furry suits and personas are it's basically cosplaying as well in the sense. So it was really interesting to see that and to be exposed to that through like our normal type of cosplays, which is like Judy Hopps and Nick Wilde. So yeah, it was really fun to be Judy. I think I really enjoyed her character from the movie because she was just very persevering and she was very loyal and compassionate, and I really like that in a character. So it was fun to bring her to life and also a little challenging because obviously in the movies they're animals. Like they have fur, they have bunny noses. So we had to kind of translate them in how they would look as humans. So that was an interesting thing to do. Something that I did is I made sure that my makeup made me kind of have like bunny like features with the face and stuff like that. But in any sense of it, it was still like a human version of these characters.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on with it, and obviously, people who know the movie, I think with these types of cosplays, it is so hard to be 100% accurate, and I think a lot of it is interpretations with these types of cosplays versus, something like Kingdom Hearts, which we're about to
Yeah,
get into, because it's still Disney, it's Square Enix, Disney.
smart. I like it.
See, the transition is working here very
Absolutely.
nicely here. So obviously you've done a bunch of Kingdom Hearts. I think you've done a Dark Aqua cosplay. You did a Riku. You've done a Kari. I like your Kari because you did a regular version, a bikini version, and
Yeah.
that interpretation. And then obviously Final Fantasy's attached to that as well, where you've done Sydney, you've done Riku, and obviously everything that Riku does, and then you've done Lid, who has a very big hammer.
Yes.
To say the least here. And I think you also done Yuffie, I want to say, as well, I
Yeah.
think, is off the top of my head. So obviously, Kingdom Hearts has a lot of stuff. I still don't understand Kingdom Hearts. I'm very confused on what happened. I just beat 3 like a month ago, which is even
Oh
worse.
wow.
So I was putting it off. Fun game. I like the Frozen world in 3. I thought it was the best world out of the bunch. Um, but I'm still confused. I'm very confused on Kingdom Hearts. But that's a whole different discussion for a different day.
Yeah, that is whoa, that is something else.
But what drew you to Kingdom Hearts? Because and obviously Final Fantasy is sort of attached to Kingdom Hearts, even though it's its own thing too.
Yeah, so growing up, I actually grew up with Final Fantasy. Like that was the thing that I was addicted to as I was growing up. I think the first game that I played was like Final Fantasy 3 or 2 or something like that. It was like on the Game Boy Advance. It's so like so old. I don't even think kids nowadays know what a Game Boy Advance is, but we would play it on that and Game Boy Color. Oh my god. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. And I always loved Final Fantasy. So growing up as a kid, I already was very into video games and anime and things like that. But more so video games because my mom, my mom was really strict growing up. So we weren't allowed to like watch TV unless it was Friday or Saturday night. We weren't allowed to play video games unless it was summer or like Christmas vacation, which is like winter break for you guys, but we don't have winter, so we just call them Christmas, Christmas vacation. And like whenever those breaks would happen, my brother and I would just be playing video games all day, every single day, and it would always be like the JRPG type games. So that's why my love for Final Fantasy has always like stuck with me ever since I was a kid. So at around like when Kingdom Hearts came out, we found out about it and it was like, oh, it's like Disney and Final Fantasy. And I was like, that's two things I love. I should get into that. And I tried it and I fell in love with Kingdom Hearts since then and like since it came out and stuff like that. So that's why I have done so many cosplays from this because it's so like integrated with my childhood and growing up in general and stuff. So yeah, that's why I do a lot of Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts stuff.
And it's cool for me because obviously I am not like a diehard Kingdom Hearts fan. I got into it late and I sort of had to play a lot of catch up with it. So I got to experience all of it at once, which is a very cool experience. Meaning
Yeah,
that about 4 months before Kingdom Hearts 3 came out, I beat Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 in a very
nice.
short amount of time. And I was fortunate enough that I had YouTube as my guide. So much easier, so much
Yeah,
easier.
absolutely. Oh my
the,
god.
the amount of time it saved me, it was mystical, in its own right. But I love the fact that you've done so many characters, and that you've done a Kari, and you've done a Riku, and that you got the Dark Aqua in there, and that you got a Yuffie, because obviously people who love this stuff and are diehard, want to see those characters, and they get attracted when somebody's done all this type of stuff, and that you just didn't do one character and you have multiple versions of the character too, which is also nice. And I love, as a guy, I love when people do, the regular version, then they do a mashup, they do a swimsuit version. Obviously, I
Yeah,
love the comic side of it. I love regular comic versions, and then I love, a little bit naughtier, and then I don't go full naughty because they're hard to sell on eBay. That's the only reason
yeah,
why I'm not like full nudity. It has nothing to do with nudity. It has to do with the fact that it is a pain to sell on eBay. But
yeah.
anyway, that's a different discussion too. So what was that like doing so much with Kingdom Hearts and having these varieties? Because it does make people say, hey, I really like this. And obviously you have a Patreon, and that also helps tremendously on there when you're doing a set, and that you can, upsell.
Yeah, yeah. So
I'm breaking every single rule here.
that's fine. That's totally fine. So when for example, let's talk about like the Kyrie bikini and regular version. So luckily that shoot actually happened right before lockdown started. Like it was the last time I went to a beach and shot things. I actually had shot Kairi, Cindy, and Riku all at the same time that day. I went out with my cousin Jeta Blante. He's a cosplay photographer, and we went to the beach. We just had a good time, and then we also shot like 3 costumes. And the reason why I think it was really easy to do like a bikini version for this character was, first of all, she comes from Destiny Islands. It's literally like she's an islander. So I was like, it makes sense if she went swimming in the ocean. So that's why we did like a
And you
bikini
happen to
version.
have an ocean around. I mean, you live
Yeah,
on an island. It just happens to be there.
Yeah. Actually, funny enough, I actually live in the city in the Philippines. So like beaches are probably like an hour or 2 hour drive away. So it's still pretty like out there, but I will say it's a lot more accessible, I guess, compared to landlocked areas or landlocked states there in the United States and stuff.
I used to live in Washington, D.C. Getting to an ocean is a
Oh,
lot harder in
yeah,
Washington,
definitely.
D.C. than it is in the Philippines. I guarantee you. It's so
Yeah,
much harder.
absolutely. If you ever come to the Philippines, oh my God, I will take you to like the best beaches because our beaches here are incredible. They are beautiful, and they're just they're the best. But yeah, so back to cosplay. um, so doing like these other types of versions, I personally am like an avid storyteller, so I like kind of doing these kind of mashups in different versions of characters, whether it's gonna be like Kyrie swimming in the ocean in her bikini, or let's say Cindy taking a break from all the work that she's usually doing in Hammerhead, and she would just lie down by the beach as well and stuff like that. So
Or
I
she was
like kind
fixing
of
a car. That's
yeah,
that's a good
exactly.
shot. That's a great shot.
Thank you. And so I like kind of thinking of like, oh, what would these characters be doing in other situations? And that's kind of where I like to get my concepts, not just like throwing like a bikini on like a random character, things like that. I mean, I have nothing against that, absolutely nothing against that.
I got
But I
nothing
think it's
against it either, so I'm not
yeah.
complaining.
But yeah, I like to think like if we did like maybe alternate universes or yeah, putting them in certain situations. That's where I find the fun of doing all these different kind of versions with these characters. It's just fun to like
and,
create things.
and this is what I like about this is that there is all that variety in there, and that you do a lot of shoots. There's a lot of cool images. There's standard images, and then you have all this other stuff, and that's what I like because obviously I just spent a lot of time scrolling through your Instagram today, building this out. So I've seen everything,
Oh
and
my god.
I got a big snapshot of your almost 1,400 pictures on Instagram. So and so obviously you have everything with Sydney working on a car to Kari just hanging out by a pier all the way up to just everybody else doing a variety of other things, as well as just some action shots and a variety of other stuff. And it is nice to have that variety because I think that cosplay is just not you putting on the thing anymore. And it's nice at a con when you're walking around, people are taking pictures. But there is that aspect of it now where you need to almost tell a story and be a visual storyteller. And it's cutting across a lot of businesses right now in general. And I feel like you really do that, especially with the Kingdom Hearts stuff, more than anything else, I feel. And the Final Fantasy stuff is sort of attached to Kingdom Hearts a little bit. So that's what I feel that you do very, very well with these characters. And also these characters have real emotional connections with, their fan base in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, so I really love storytelling in general. Something that I am also like very obsessed with aside from cosplay is Dungeons and Dragons. So I love storytelling and just being part of a world and bringing it to life. So I think
Oh,
because of that, I also approach cosplay and art in that sense where we really like want to take these worlds that we've fallen in love with and bring them into reality in like any way, whether that's acting like the character or shooting a scene for that character or mimicking like let's say a scene in that video game or that movie that we're doing. So that's always what I like to do when it comes to cosplay. It's bring it to life, not just put a costume of that character and take pictures. Like it's always the thought of like let's bring them here, let's make them real.
Even going further, because I have to ask, because obviously Lead has a gigantic ass hammer. I need to know, how was this produced? How is it made? And because this is also one of those larger than life type things that I also think helps tremendously with your Lid cosplay. Because when you have that giant prop and you have those images with it, and obviously they're edited and some stuff is added in its position, I mean, that's also bringing it larger than life in many ways too. And it's bringing a real sense to this. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
going to be 100% honest, and I think most people understand that we all know Kingdom Hearts isn't real, but when it's done and those photos are shot with Kari hanging out on the pier or Lid sort of jumping in midair with that big hammer, it brings the realness out. If that makes any sense to anybody out there, obviously I'm probably not describing it the best way, but I think the point is being made. So what is that like with having certain things that do bring out the larger than life feeling?
So to do that, like we do it in so many different ways. So for Kyrie, for example, we went out to the beach to do it to like mimic Destiny Islands and stuff like that. And then when it came to Lid, Lid was just a whole nother ball game. First of all, it was actually such a surreal feeling. We did Final Fantasy for this huge gaming convention here in the Philippines called ESGS. Um, and actually, Square Enix had approached me and a couple other cosplayers. So this Lid costume was actually in partner with the Square Enix team, and it was insane to meet the people behind the game and stuff like that. So obviously that's also why we had to like really bring it to life and make that gigantic hammer, for example, because like these were the people behind the game that were literally going to have us like walking around the convention and promoting the game. So it was insane. And the only way I could have made that hammer, I actually did not make it whatsoever. It was my amazing brother. His name is Jello Grayson. I mentioned him earlier. He is a cosplay crafter, and he is just the best. He literally made that from scratch out of like EVA foam and like PVC pipes and things like that. It was incredible and incredibly heavy, but it like totally brought out the costume. Like I made all of like the little details with the costume and the fabric pieces and things like that. And yeah, that was accurate. But to have like the hammer with me during the convention was just awesome. It was an eye stopper. You would immediately know like, oh, that's the Final Fantasy booth. We see that giant yellow hammer over there. So it was
And even
so
going
cool.
further, because obviously when you are in paid partnerships, obviously Lady Dimitru from Resident Evil with Capcom is sort of the biggest paid partnership in cosplay right now. And some people are denying that they were paid, but a lot of people were accordingly. And I'm pretty sure that a lot more people are being paid right now. And I think it paid off nicely for Capcom. But obviously, when a video game company is approaching you to pay or have a partnership with you and that you're representing them, it's very, very interesting. And what is that like? Because it's sort of a approval, brings attention to you, and also it sort of states you're on the right track a little bit.
Yeah, so working with Square Enix, first of all, was completely surreal because I have been like a Square Enix fan since it was still called Squaresoft. It wasn't even called Square Enix yet. And like just to be able to work with them, I remember my friend who was cosplaying with me, Jin from Jin Behind Infinity. Um, we were just freaking out anytime that like we were sharing like our progress, like, hey, have you done this? Oh, have you done this? And then we'd just be screaming like unbelievable that this is happening to us. And of course, there is also like a level of pressure when it comes to things like this because yeah, these people are the ones who created the game, and we have to bring justice to their designs and to their characters. So it was really interesting because the process for Square Enix at least was, they sent us like the renders, the HD like renders of these characters like T-posing like front and back and stuff like that. So we were able to see every little aspect of the costume, which also meant that they were going to see every aspect of the costume. Like they would know exactly like, oh, you didn't put that little like button pin over there that Lid has and stuff like that. So it was really awesome to be able to work off of like a reference that was like a 360 view, because often we watch like these anime and these movies and stuff, and they're like on the screen and you'll have to like pause it or like try and take in every aspect of their costume or just look at like their movie posters. But obviously it's not the same as having like a 360 look at the costume. So as awesome as it was to have that resource, it was also really nerve-wracking because again, you had to make sure that you got every little detail right. So it was crazy. I think it was just a whole nother type of way when doing the costume, because obviously you also need to not really appease, but it needs to be approved by the people you're working for first and foremost before anything. So yeah, it was fun, but it was crazy.
It changes the way cosplay is done. Obviously, I am an independent podcaster and I have complete control over what I'm doing. If I was being paid by somebody, I would have a lot less control and there'd be a different standard. And sometimes it's good to have a standard and have a high position. Obviously, I run this thing the way I run it, and I'm trying to produce the best product I can produce, but I also have complete autonomy in the way I run it. And so there's good and bad with it. And obviously having a company back you, press wise and throwing money at it and also stating, hey, we approve of this can be very, very helpful. And so it's super cool in that regard. But obviously I want to jump out of Square Enix before I get you and me in trouble.
Yeah.
And I do want to talk about Space Jam because Space Jam is coming. And I'm going to state this, and I might get some flack for it. It's going to be really good, Space Jam 2, or it's going to be really bad. It's not going to be in the middle. Okay? It's going to be the greatest thing on earth, or it's going to be a disaster. But you've done Lola Bunny. And
Yes, I
obviously, a
have.
lot of people have done Lola Bunny, and Lola Bunny is extremely cosplayed. And so what prompted this? Because obviously everybody knows who she is from Space Jam.
Yeah, and everyone loves her from Space Jam. So I watched Space Jam when it came out, and I loved it immediately. And I'm also like a queer person, so when I saw Lola Bunny, something happened in my brain. And I was a little kid, but like I was like, why am I attracted to this bunny? Why did they make her this attractive? But anyway, so growing up, I just always remembered Lola Bunny to be like this really cool character from like my childhood and stuff. And then there was this artist, Saki Michan, who would draw like, oh, well, she drew a bunch of things, but she basically drew Lola Bunny as like a human form. So she didn't have ears, she didn't have like a bunny tail. It was her as a human, and I fell in love with that illustration. Like it was really, really good. So I wanted to try cosplaying that one day. And funny enough, the first time I wore Lola Bunny was to a convention where I had no idea what I wanted to wear. So the morning of the convention, right before we left, I made that Lola Bunny costume, like the top and the shorts. And luckily I had blonde hair, like long blonde hair. So I just needed to put my hair up into a ponytail and do the makeup. But I literally made that costume like the morning of the convention, and then I wore it. And that's the story of how I became Lola Bunny.
And obviously, I mean, it's just a very iconic. It's not a very difficult cosplay to pull off. And I mean, obviously, I'd probably fail at it because I'm not a cosplayer. I don't know how to sew. I don't even know how to use a hot glue gun. So I would most likely fail at building anything resembling good. I again admit defeat when need be. But obviously, that is not as complicated, I think, as a few of the others we're about to jump into. And I do want to talk about your Pokemon stuff because I am an anime fan.
Ooh.
In my name, it's Pop
Yay.
Anime Comics, and you've done a very interesting Vaporeon. And I don't
Yes.
know how to say that word. It's like Ginjinka. I want to
Yeah,
say.
Gijincha. Yeah, correct. You got it. You got it.
I've seen it. I've interviewed people who've done similar things in that nature. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but obviously you've done a bunch of them. And the Vaporeon is where we're going to start because it's super interesting. Obviously, it's a human-formed Vaporeon that might reference something comic-oriented. It might be like a fusion, like a Bishonjin, I think it is the statement type thing. And so obviously, how did all that come about? Hopefully I'm hitting it on the head here.
You absolutely are. So, Gijinkas are basically, I believe it's a Japanese term. I forgot what exactly it translates into. But basically, it's like an anap oh my God, I can't say this word. Anamorphic.
Animal something like
Yes.
that, right?
So, you guys get it, that word. It's like a human-ish version of the character. So, for example, with my Vaporeon, I mean, obviously, Vaporeon is like, a Pokemon, looks like this weird fish cat thing. But when I cosplayed it, I decided I wanted to bring her to life and make her like this human-ish version. But I
It's
wanted it.
yeah.
Sorry, yeah,
It's almost belly dancer like is a good way to put it. It's got
yeah.
that in there. It's got more of a Bishonjin feel to it, and obviously it's sort of got that going on. But you also still have a lot of the Vaporeon attributes of Pokemon in there as well. And it's kind of like, okay, if this was a human, what would it look like with still those elements in there?
Yeah, exactly. So I had a lot of fun designing this first like Gijinka that I did because you actually got it right with like the whole belly dancer thing. In Final Fantasy Tactics, they have like these job classes. It's very like regular RPG job classes. And I actually went with like the dancer type of thing because to me, Vaporeon is like, she's a very fluid being. In fact, like one of their powers is to like just become water, just like disappear
Yeah,
into the water and stuff
Vaporeon
like
is
that.
never a guy. I could tell you that.
Oh, really? I don't remember that.
It can't be. It just doesn't work. Flareon, you can imagine as a guy. Jolteon is
Ah,
definitely a male. EV evolution, without a doubt.
but yeah. Okay. So anyway, yeah. So Vaporeon, she has that power. So that's why I wanted to kind of create that kind of look with her as well. And I just have to say, like, it's so much fun to kind of have the reins to design a cosplay and do like these kind of crossovers, and just figure out what works. Another thing that was really good about this, when you do like these crossovers where you design them yourself, is you can kind of already think like, oh, I have a wig that could work for this. Oh, I have extra fabrics that I can use for this. So you can even like kind of direct the costs of this costume depending on what you own, and that's how I approached Vaporeon, because Vaporeon was actually the very first costume I had made completely from scratch, like from fabric. And that was the time that I read the manual of the sewing machine to learn how to use it and stuff. So yeah, it was really fun to do that costume. It's another aspect I think in cosplay where instead of copying something that you've seen, you're doing everything from the ground up, from designing how it looks, designing how it's constructed, to actually creating it and then bringing it to life, which is
And to even go further into this, you've done a Pikachu version that's more rogue from
yeah.
the X-Men, is definitely in that style as well. And so what was that like? Because obviously with Pokemon, people get Pokemon real quick. It's just one of those things that it's been around forever. Obviously, I've interviewed a lot of people from Pokemon. I got to do Veronica Taylor on my other show, and she
That's
was the original
awesome.
Ketchum. I got to do with Lisa Ortiz, who's directing that Netflix show.
Oh my god,
Um,
that's so cool.
Tara Sand has been on, who's Bulbasaur, and Richie. And so obviously there's a lot of people who have been involved in Pokemon. And so obviously one of the things is that people get it instantly. I'm 28. I don't know how old you are. You're young enough that I feel that it's okay to ask that question.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely.
So I feel very comfortable that I can ask that question. But
Yeah,
but the idea is that it instantly connects with people, And so when you mash it up, it connects also very easily, and that's very nice. So what was that Pikachu Rogue like? Because everybody gets Rouge Rogue from the X-Men. People know her from the 90s. And obviously people know, Pikachu very well.
Yeah. So I would say I'm a bigger Pokemon fan than like Kingdom Hearts, because Pokemon has been with me all my life. Like I grew up with Pokemon. My favorite, it's so generic, but my favorite is Pikachu, because when I was younger, watching like the Indigo League and like the Orange Islands, like the first two seasons of Pokemon, I would have like a little Pikachu stuffed toy that I would bring everywhere, and I'd be like, my Pikachu, my best friend. You can't mess with me. I'm gonna like electric shock you and stuff like that when I was younger. So um so Pokemon has really just been a part of my life ever since I can remember. So to do like a Pikachu cosplay, I knew that like I wanted to do something that was a crossover again. And actually, the crossover of like the rogue type of Pikachu, it came from another like RPG sense, where it was like, like the thief job class and stuff like that. So that's where the crossover came in. And when you're doing these type of crossovers or Gishinkas, like the number one thing is you have to remember that there are aspects of a character that are so iconic. Like with Pikachu, it's the red cheeks and the ears and stuff. So even if I was doing like this crossover that was not like, half Pikachu, half human. It was like a full human, just with Pikachu elements. I had to translate kind of like the ears into something different, where I had like little feathers in my headpiece that kind of mimicked the ears of Pikachu instead. And then instead of like just circle red cheeks, it was like a lot of blush and freckles to kind of simulate the cheeks instead and stuff like that. So it's just really important to remember that when you're mashing up two characters in particular, or two concepts, there are things that are like iconic to that character that you have to keep. So Pikachu, yellow, red cheeks, little black tips on the ears and stuff like that. You have to make sure that when you're designing these like crossovers, you have to put those elements of the character in there, and then see what you can like push and pull between the two concepts. So that's why, luckily, like you mentioned, Pokemon is so iconic, especially Pikachu. I mean, he's like the face of Pokemon, basically. And a lot of people will recognize him very quickly. But even when you're designing it, you have to make sure that it's not too far off.
And then obviously going beyond this, we have to talk about Articuno too, because you did
Yeah.
this awesome one with that one also. And that one has sort of small wings. It's got a nice, gala approach to it. And obviously there's a lot of cool stuff going on with this one.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, like the gala look is exactly what we were going for. We were like, what would happen if, like the legendary birds? Because I did this with my friends, Fox and Rib, who did Moltres and Zapdos, and then I was Articuno. And we were like, if they were like these ethereal goddesses, like think like the harvest goddess from Harvest Moon, for example. They just look really ethereal with like their dresses and stuff, but they still look human. But you know that they're like of another level, like they're still like legendary and ethereal. So that's where we went with our concept for the legendary birds, and that was such a fun thing to do, to kind of mash everything up and then make sure it still looked really like magical, but at the same time still grounded to the fact that we were just cosplayers.
And I love it. And I think it's super smart to do it. I also think that the three legendary birds are the easiest to do a gal look with or do something along those lines with, because they're almost built in that way. And it's also the game
Yeah.
exclusive, and it works so nicely. Versus the other trio that you did, which was the Avatar trio as Ozai
Oh yeah.
Angels. And obviously, I'm a big Avatar fan. There's been a bunch of people on Avatar who's been on. Jeannie Kwan,
Yeah.
who plays Suki, has been on.
Oh my
Um,
god, that's
and
awesome.
and Toph, Jesse Flowers, has been on. this show and my other show as well. And so, obviously, where did this idea come from? Because it's a reference to Charlie's Angels, obviously, and it's kind of funny in a lot of ways because you had a Ty Lee and you also had an Azula as Ozai's Angels, and those three characters obviously people know. And I think you were May out of the group.
Yes, I was. I was May. It was really fun because I actually almost forgot. I was like, what? I did do Avatar? And it was because we did a version of it where my friend saw this artist kind of reimagine them to wear different clothing. So they're wearing like these black oriental, very almost high fashion type of looks compared to like their usual garb in the show. And we just fell in love with the design, so we decided to cosplay that version instead of like the regular version from the show. And it was really cool to we contacted the artist, of course, first and foremost, and asked if we were allowed to cosplay this version that they made, and they said yes. So once we got the go signal, we decided to just run with it, and it was a lot of fun to bring them to life. I believe when we did that costume, there was also like, I don't know if you guys have it in the cons in the States, but basically some fandoms would like meet up in within the convention. So there was like this Avatar meetup, and that was the day that we wore those costumes so that we could meet fellow Avatar fans and stuff like that. It was really really cool.
And I love the concept because obviously people know Charlie's Angels from a lot of different entities. And then I think they remade it, from the original. Obviously, older people know it. My parents know it. I know because they know it.
Yeah.
I know it for other things as well. And so obviously it's very iconic. And there's always references to it in other things in Avatar. I'm not too sure if you knew this, but back last, I think, April or May, it was the #1 show in the world on Netflix.
Oh, that's
And I
awesome.
think across all cable, it had the #1 ratings, and part of the reason why is because everybody was home and
Yeah.
all these people who grew up watching it, started watching with their kids because there's nothing to do, and it got on Netflix, and then they were watching Korra. And so obviously a lot of people know Avatar. And
Yeah.
obviously the books are killing it with the Kyoshi series. And what happened, I didn't read the second one yet, so I know what happens though, because my friends are really good people, and they ruin everything for me. And then obviously Avatar Studios. And so what is that like for you to have a concept? Because I don't think I've seen this concept before being done with the Charlie's Angels version of it.
Yeah, it was really, I don't even know how my friend found this version, but the art was just incredible. I believe the username, she was like a DeviantArt artist, and it was like Q Dragon or Quan Dragon or something like that. And the art is just incredible. And like just to do like a different version of something that we really really loved, all three of us. We were big Avatar fans before the whole pandemic happened, and it's really cool now that a lot of people are getting into it. It's very interesting. But yeah, it was really fun to do a different version of it and bring that to life instead of like what we usually see. I do actually want to cosplay like the canon version, like the one from the show, one day. But I want to do that with my friends, and it's the pandemic right now, so I can't.
Well, she is getting a Pop Funko from Books a Million.
Yes,
So she's
yeah,
finally getting a Pop Funko, which is fantastic. So obviously they may or may not have something. She also married Zuko, so
yeah.
you got to find a Zuko for you.
I
They'll be
do.
off to the races. They'll be perfect. They'll be perfect. And so obviously talking about another fandom that's similar to Avatar, and that is Powerpuff Girls. And you
Oh
did Bubbles,
yeah,
the punk version of Bubbles, and I
yeah.
guess more of an adult punk version. And obviously that's another trio group. So what was that like doing that one?
It was really fun to do. So I guess you can notice now it's kind of a trend where I like to do just like weird versions of these characters. That one was with my best friends again, Riven Fox, and the thing with me, Rib, and Fox, like us trio of best friends. Like the trios in shows and in media, it's like a trope where you can tell like who's who. Like there's the heart of the group, there's like I believe it's like the lungs of the group or something like that. But basically, it's like a trio where they're all very different people, but they're all like stereotypes and stuff like that. So when we did Powerpuff, it was like no question to who was who. Fox was gonna be Blossom because she's our like ferocious leader type thing. And then I was gonna be Bubbles because I'm just like an emotional empath little thing. And then Rib was gonna be Buttercup for sure because she's a fighter. And we were actually planning to do like the regular version, but then we were like, what if we do like a punk version? That's gonna be so much more fun and so much more up our alley. And we don't have to like look like children, you know? Because Powerpuff Girls like they're like tiny and they're like actual like children. So if we imagine them in real life, we were like they would look like toddlers. So we wanted to do like a punk version that would be more grown up, kind of like a girl gang, ready to beat you up kind of thing. So yeah, it was really fun to do that. I think we made our costumes out of things out of our closet. We just put stuff together, painted stuff on it, and things like that.
And so what is that like? Because one of the things, and even going back to the avatar, is that obviously when you're cosplaying with a group and with other people, you all have to stay in the same parameters of the cosplay. You all have to, sort of have the same idea. Everybody has to know their role, and everybody has to sort of, use similar materials to some degree, where you can't use, PVC for Blossom and not use it for Bubbles, or you
Yeah,
can't use the Avril Lavigne look for Buttercup and Bubbles, but not for Blossom. And
yeah,
obviously
exactly.
everybody has to show up to the con too, because all of a sudden somebody
Yeah,
doesn't show up. It's not going to be the end of the world per se, but it's going to defeat the purpose. And
yeah,
also,
yeah,
though, what that does is that when all three of you are hanging out, it obviously attracts more people because people say, "Oh, I get it now. I know exactly what this is," and it does make it easier to get attention. I would imagine photo shoots and other people taking a look at you, and people just saying, "Oh, that's awesome," and taking a quick iPhone shot, for instance. So, what is that like? And also, it just allows for more playing off, especially even in the creation process when that happens.
yeah.
I would imagine that somebody throws out an idea, says let's do the Powerpuff Girls, and somebody says let's do it this style, and then somebody's like, oh, we should all do it this style, and then you go sort of narrow it down, and then everybody's wheels get turning.
Yeah, it's actually exactly like that. Like that's how the creative process happens when we're constructing that costume. I have been best friends with Fox and Rib for like all throughout like our younger years, even before we started cosplaying. So I think that number one is like the reason why we worked so well together. We were friends before we even started cosplaying, and then we started cosplaying together. And that's why I think it was really easy for us to work with each other. But when we did make these Powerpuff costumes, we all actually went to like my place and we made them together. And it was like a fun craft day, well, craft couple of days where we would make these costumes. And we often go to conventions together anyway, whether we're all dressed as a group or dressed as individual things. Like we already go to conventions together. So to do like a group cosplay and then to just go to a convention, that was really fun. Like to have to like just be next to each other all the time, which already happened. It just so happened that now we were all cosplaying from one thing, which was which was really awesome.
And I love it, and I think it's great. And obviously, Powerpuff Girls, grew up sort of watching it. It was on when I was growing up, and I'm 28, and it's coming back, and there's comics and all sorts of stuff
Oh yeah.
surrounding it. So it's not leaving anytime soon. And another series that isn't leaving anytime soon that's in the anime world is My Hero Academia. And I
Oh
took my
yeah.
hat off earlier. And Momo, you've done a casual, you've done a uniform version of her, and you've done a hero suit of hers as well as you've done Dabby, and that's an expensive Pop Funko for those who are interested. And then you've done like, Riot as well, along with Froppy and Mina. And so, what is that like to get into My Hero? Because it is probably it's in the top 3 shows right now in the anime world, if not the number
Yeah,
one spot.
I think it is. I think it is. So I actually am like, I wouldn't say I'm picky, but I think because I do cosplay full time, it's really hard for me to latch on to series when they come out. And the reason why I was really attracted to My Hero Academia was because if you look at like the cast of characters, even just from like the class 1A, they're so different. They're so like insanely uh diverse that I really loved it. So I immediately got hooked onto the show when it came out. And I just love that there are just all these different types of characters. And for example, with Momo, I liked how like when you look at her first, obviously like with her hero suit, she's like this super sexy woman who does like these cool things. But you can tell that her character lies in her like intelligence and her um way to get around things. Like she just has to have that costume because that's how like her costume works. That's how her quirk works, where her powers, they come out of her skin and stuff like that. So that's why. But like her as a character is actually she's quite reserved and she's very intelligent, and that's like what you celebrate. So I kind of like the irony of Momo, and I feel like that you can see that with a lot of characters in My Hero Academia as well. Like they look really cool, but then there's also something very relatable and human about them that I really like. And what's so fun with My Hero Academia characters is because since they're all different, it's really like as a cosplayer who creates their own stuff, like it's just really cool to jump from, let's say, Momo, who's like this really sexy cosplay, and then jump to Kirishima, who's like this really manly cosplay, and then jump to, let's say, Froppy, who is literally like a frog. And then we go into Mina, who is like an alien. Like it's insane the type, like the different kinds of techniques that you use to be these different characters. And the different personalities that you can become to do these characters and stuff. So I really love My Hero Academia.
It's sort of like One Piece in a lot of ways, and I know that you
Yeah.
do sort of a closet Naruto, but Naruto is not like that, where a lot of the characters are very similar. In My Hero,
Mm-hmm.
you have very different characters. In One Piece, you have beyond different characters,
Yeah.
and it's very interesting when you have an entire ensemble cast. I don't know if you're a wrestling fan, but a good wrestling company has a variety of different characters in their repertoire so that you have a variety of different matches.
Yeah.
And so it's very similar to that because you get to play a lot with sandboxes. And that's something about My Hero Academia. And obviously, just to throw this down, Mina is pink,
Yeah.
in one way, and Froppy is obviously a frog. And as you stated, you know, Red Riot, Kirishima, obviously he goes a certain way, and obviously he got a big boost in season 4. So it's very
Yeah.
cool to that way. And also, people recognize that stuff immediately and they understand it immediately. And it helps to get noticed when you're doing characters that people know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, no, I want to back out of anime because I do want to talk about DC Comics.
Oh,
And we're going to end up
awesome.
on DC. And so I want to talk about it because I think you did Stephanie Brown.
I
And
did. I did.
so Chuck Dixon created Stephanie Brown, and he was on my show. He also
Oh my
created Baby.
God.
And so I love Spoiler. I love
Yeah.
Stephanie Brown. I enjoy everything Stephanie Brown has done. Stephanie Brown at one point was Spoiler, then she became Robin, then she got demoted. It's a whole thing to understand DC Comics. I'm like the guy to understand the entire lineage of Robin, but that's a different discussion. So, what made you want to do Stephanie Brown versus Damian Wayne, Tim Drake, you know, Dick Grayson, all those people? I mean, your last name is Grayson, so it would be very for you to, and you're Dinny, so you could have Dinny Grayson. Oh, it would have been beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, so the reason why I jumped into DC Comics, 'cause first of all, I was a huge DC Comics fan. Dinny Grayson actually comes from Richard Grayson. That's why my cosplay name is Dinny Grayson. Um, and I so when I jumped into like the storylines of the Robins, for example, because the Robins are fantastic a fantastic group of superheroes and superheroines, and I loved. I think out of all the women, I really liked Stephanie Brown because she was a little spitfire compared to everyone else. Like the reason why she became Robin is she literally broke into the Batcave, and like the fact that she could do that was insane. And I really liked how she stood up for herself and um, was just her own being. I mean, even with her as spoiler compared to her as Robin, it was just very different. And I like that. I actually planned to do like Robin and then spoiler and then her run as Batgirl, like all those cosplays. But I guess I just got too busy or something. I don't know why I actually never pushed through with that. I should. But yeah, I really love Stephanie Brown's entire story arc. At least before the reboot of the New 52, because that's when the New 52 happened. I think I stopped. I started college as well, so I had to stop with like just reading comics. I just did not have the time for it. But pre New 52, I was really, really into the storylines there.
And so obviously Stephanie Brown is very different as a cosplay and even building it out than Robin, and Damian Wayne or Tim Drake. And so what was that entire thing building it out? Because obviously her personality is different and what she wears is different. And obviously there's different things you have to factor for with her. And obviously some people forget, who Stephanie Brown is. Some people know who she is. And so what was that like at a con and debuting it? Because, some people, when I mention Stephanie Brown and we go through talking about Robins, people always leave her out because it's a
Yeah,
weird arc where people know Damian Wayne, people know a bunch of Robins. They just don't know her. They know,
yeah.
Frank Miller's Robin, but they don't know Stephanie Brown.
Yeah, so I'm the type of person to just cosplay characters that I like genuinely love, even if they're quite obscure. Like if I want to be them, I'm gonna be them. Nothing's gonna stop me. So, um, being recognized in a con, yeah, it feels really great, especially because you get to meet people who also like the character. But it's something that I don't actually think about a lot because I just enjoy being these characters and bringing them to life. But being Stephanie Brown, I actually debuted her in a comic convention here in the Philippines, and it was great because these were I was surrounded by fellow comic nerds, so they understood who I was. It was very clear. Everyone knew who Stephanie Brown was, but if I had worn it to like let's say a regular cosplay convention, I don't think I would have been able to meet as many like fellow nerds who knew her for sure. I was surely called like girl Robin. I believe I was called Robina once. It was very strange, but it's like I mentioned a while ago. Conventions sometimes happens in malls here, so you have like regular families who suddenly want to take a picture with like these weird cosplayers dressing up in the mall and stuff. So I would say like outside of like the community of nerds and stuff, that's when you get like random people just saying like, "Oh, it's the girl Robin, it's a girl version of Robin," but they don't actually know who Stephanie Brown is. But that's okay.
And then even going further into DC here, because you've done a lot of Harley Quinn too. And
Yeah,
so you've done Harley Quinn, Suicide Squad, you did a Chokella, or I think it's Chokella, or I can't speak today.
it's okay. I don't
Chokella,
remember.
whatever it is. Harley Quinn, which is sort of bikini and red and blue jacket. You did an Ivy League version of Harley Quinn as well, and you did a bloodied up version and a clean version. So, what is diving into Harley Quinn look like for you? Because obviously you've done a bunch of Harley Quinns.
Yeah,
And
so
some of it's original, some of it's sort of copied, some of it's sort of, I
yeah,
guess, cookie cutter, for lack of a better word. I think Suicide Squad is cookie cutter right now.
yeah.
But obviously, Ivy League Harvey is more newer and more original.
Yeah, so cosplaying Harley Quinn has just been a blast. Obviously, she is like an insane character. So it's always fun to be her because you can literally just go crazy in a convention. Obviously, still respectful of people, number one thing. But it's really fun to just be like make funny faces in a picture and not worry about looking pretty and and things like that. Like you have to be crazy to be Harley when you're cosplaying her, portraying her in a convention or a photo shoot. So I have a lot of fun when I'm Harley.
So,
I
so, so,
actually, sorry, yeah?
so I am curious because a lot of people have cosplayed Harley Quinn, especially when Suicide Squad came out, and this sort of might how you got into Ivy Harley a little bit. But what is that like? Because when there's 100 Harley Quinns running around and 100 people, are all the same cosplay, it's harder to stand out. But then you dive into variants of that cosplay. So what is that like for you? Because obviously, I think that's what started happening a lot with Harley Quinn. I don't know if that was the reason why you brought out Ivy and Coachella and all those other Harley Quinns because everybody was doing Suicide Squad Harley Quinn or doing Bombshell Harley Quinn from like Arkham, Asylum and all that stuff. And now, you got to become more original to get noticed.
Yeah, so I actually love finding other cosplayers who are cosplaying the same character. I get a real kick out of it. I'm a very introverted person, so I feel like it's a lot easier to start a conversation with someone like dressed as the same character because number one, you'll know that they also like that character. So you can start a conversation even just talking about that character that you're both cosplaying as. And if let's say they made their own costume or they made their own part of the costume, you can connect in that level as well of like creating what we're currently wearing. So I personally like did not mind when I would see like 100 other Harleys while I was also dressed as Harley. Like I would be so excited to meet them and stuff. But the reason why I started doing like these variants of Harley, if we could call them that, is because Harley is the type of character I feel like that you could really get away with doing so many different versions of her. I mean, if you read any of the comics of Harley, she is dressed in like 1,000 different outfits. She's wearing really kooky disguises in the beginning, for example, and then she just she just does what she wants. So it's really easy to reimagine Harley like Ivy League Harley or the music festival Harley and things like that. So I think Harley is just so fun to cross over with all these things because she's like a loose cannon. She would definitely like if she found like some kind of teleporting stone to teleport into like alternate universes, you'd know that Harley would like literally like island hop between all these different universes and try something new. So I that's the reason why I do different versions of Harley. It's just fun.
Yeah, and I mean, I like the Ivy League Harley. I think that's very original. I think it's a lot of fun. Also, just imagine Harley Quinn, because it's Professor, Harley Quinn before she became Harley Quinn and became
Yeah.
sociopathic. She was a professor, and it's kind of funny to be in her school, and you could just imagine her teaching. But then to go to the last cosplay I want to talk about, and that's your Starfire, because obviously I'm a Teen Titans fan. I am
Yeah.
old school 80s Teen Titans. I loved Red Hood and the Outlaws and the New
I love that.
52. I enjoyed that first scene in Starfire coming out of the water. I
Yeah.
bought a beat up version. I am looking for a 9.8 of that book for a reason. I'm going to spend good money on it. It's not even that expensive. It maybe is a $60 book. It's a great scene coming out of that comic. I want to actually get like framed. Oh, it's going to be great on like a
Yeah.
canvas. Whether
Same
that's
here.
legal or not, I don't know, and I don't really care because I'm going to do it. I'll ask for forgiveness, not permission. But anyway, having said that, I loved her run in her own title, and you obviously do a very sexy version of her. I used it for the event and the cover photo on Facebook, and a bunch of people might have watched that and are watching it for that photo, let alone, and it's Starfire in a bikini, which is so fitting in so many ways. And she
Yeah,
has green
absolutely.
eyes, orange hair. Obviously, it's straight, and it's very much that new 52 version, but the green eyes are sort of what's cool in it. So, talk about that because I'm super interested in that.
Yeah, being Starfire was so much fun. I love her as a character. You know how she's just, first of all, she's an alien, and that's always fun. I like extraterrestrials. And I love that Starfire just loves deeply. Like I feel like that's the core of her character. Like the reason why she's like very sexualized, well, she's not really sexualized, but she's very like in touch with her sexuality rather. Um, she just loves love, and she loves expressing love, whether it's towards like whoever she's dating in the comics. For example, she dated famously Dick Grayson for a while, I believe, right? Am I getting that right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're like
okay,
a
okay.
couple in Titan Academy right now.
Yeah, yeah. So there we go. And like that's what I loved about Starfire for sure. She wasn't afraid, even in like the kid show, like Teen Titans, like the animated series, the one that was made for children. You can tell that she just is very compassionate toward other people, even though she doesn't really understand like the Earth ways sometimes, which is really funny in the show. Um, so yeah, and I wanted to do Starfire in a bikini for two reasons. One was I really missed the pool. I really just wanted to go out and go for a swim. And luckily, my cousin and I, who is my photographer, we found like a private pool that we could rent out all to ourselves, and that's where we shot in. So that was a lot of fun. So that was the first reason why I wanted to do a Bikini Starfire. But the second reason is actually the scene that you mentioned in Red Hood and the Outlaws, that first issue. I remember seeing that for the first time, and I was like, yes, Starfire, let's go. Um, so that's why I did that version. It was actually specifically that scene. But obviously, I knew I couldn't go to the beach, so I couldn't do it like coming out of the water. So
So
instead,
to even
we
go further onto that, because Starfire with Teen Titans, in the '80s, she has a look, and it's definitely more adult. Then obviously all throughout the '80s, it happened, and even going into Jeff Johns' run on the Teen Titans, and she was only in that for maybe like 20 issues, and then obviously she was sort of written out and did something else. I don't really know what happened to her after that, but the Teen Titans
yeah.
obviously evolved in that run of the Teen Titans. And that's what I'm most familiar with beyond the '80s. But then the TV show obviously meant for kids. Obviously, Robin and her have a relationship, but she is not sexual at all in many
No,
ways.
not at all.
She's
Yeah.
affectionate. Yeah, obviously, there's some romance, some stuff going on, but not sexual. And then, obviously, Teen Titans Go, clearly not sexual, but then now in her Red Hood and the Outlaw, she's more adult. And even in some stuff like Justice, she's more adult. And then obviously in Starfire, her own series, she's ditzy but clearly adult. So obviously this is very much an adult cosplay that
Hmm.
you've done, and you've adultified her for lack of a better words. What is that like? Because she is going down that path. And obviously even in Titan Academy, it's more adult.
Yeah. So I feel like it's still very much like in her character to like you said, she really is leading up to that way, and I feel like it just fit her character anyway to do something like this, like to do something very like sexy. Because even in like the non-sexy parts of Starfire, it's still wrapped in like affection. There's still a level of intimacy for it. Yeah, it's not sexual, maybe it's romantic, maybe it's platonic, but it's something about Starfire with the way that she expresses love. It's very visual, very physical. So when we did like this bikini version where it was very like a sexy pinup shoot almost, that's like kind of what we were going for. Um, we just wanted to express that part, that side of her, that she is a very expression, like she expresses love outwardly, like through how she looks and her actions and things like that. So I feel like even though we did take it to another aspect where it's a little more adultified compared to like her canon versions of current iteration, it's still very much her. Like I don't think it was far from the character whatsoever. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, and I love it, and which that I think it really does capture who Starfire is. I like the fact that it is in a bikini. I think that goes to her character as well, as I was stating, and I just think it's great. And I think doing a non-traditional version of her just in her regular top from her own series or what she wore in the show, like that's all been done before too. And after a
Yeah.
while, like, Marilyn Manson has, everything's been done before, and you can ask for more, and you know it by name. And I've obviously paraphrased that entire thing for a reason, but obviously I want something new. And I feel like this is what it gives. And that's what you gave in many ways. And so that's why I like this. And that's also what caught my eye. Is your Lola Bunny and this Starfire caught my eye. So,
Oh,
so
thank you.
obviously, versus and then the other stuff is great. Don't get me wrong, but this is what really says, oh, this is something that's different as a cosplayer, and I'm looking for something different because I want to see characters reimagined in new
Yeah.
ways or pushing the line because everything's been done already. What else can you do that's new? And that's something that, like, that bubble in the May is a good example of that as well. So obviously, I think that's super important. But I do want to back out of cosplays now because I do want to let you go soon. I promise. I promise.
It's okay. Oh my God. It's like morning time right now here. We're flying.
Well, I would like to be in bed in the next hour.
Oh,
So,
that's
so,
true.
so I promise. We're going to get out, and I'm sure some people watching would also like me to get out of here. But anyhow, obviously, I do want to back out of cosplays and talk about cons because it's very interesting that in America, cons are now starting to come back. I have friends who are going to cons now and gearing up for it. We're about to enter, I guess, a miniature con season that's going to be somewhat modified, and nobody knows exactly how it's going to play out. But how is it in the Philippines, and how has it been, and where is it going? Because it is super interesting, and I'm curious because obviously I don't know what other countries look like, and I'm very much ill-informed on that, on what the Philippines looks like as reopening and dealing with COVID and all that stuff as far as public gatherings again.
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, prior to COVID, we would have a lot of conventions here in the Philippines. We didn't have a convention season. It was like year-round convention season, but the big cons would happen like months apart, luckily. But now that it's, oh, sorry, my dog is barking.
No worries.
During lockdown, actually until now, public gatherings have been banned just for safety reasons. We have, I guess it's different here in the Philippines because our resources probably just aren't as much as for you guys. Like, I'm aware in the States, you are all mostly vaccinated already, for example, to help fight the virus. Whereas
In the
here,
States, you can get a vaccination in your CVS. You could get a
wow.
vaccination and pretty much in your pizza place is how vaccinations are rolled out. It took a while to get there. And it took about 5 months to get to that place. But before, it was very, very difficult to get a vaccination. Where I was waking up every Monday morning trying to sign up for it, and then all of a sudden it broke, where a bunch of vaccinations essentially got released. And it was wonderful, meaning that it didn't cost any money. It was completely, relatively free for everybody, and that you just show up at some place. And obviously, you had to like register to some degree, but it was like a 5-minute thing, and anybody can register who wants to register. So obviously, that's how the U.S. has gone. Where now, if you want a vaccination, you can get it anywhere. You get it in your CVS, or you get it in your Walmart. You can get it in, and I do with the pizza place thing, but it's almost like that. So, having said all that, obviously, continue because I'm curious about your country.
Yeah, that is so cool that it's like that. I actually just recently got my vaccination. Because I believe that they've sent over batches at a time. And when I got my vaccination done, I had to like go to like this public area that was holding like the vaccination process. And I had to wait for like 3 hours in a very organized line. It was very organized, but they had like a whole system. Like they had to take my blood pressure, ask me a bunch of questions and things like that. So it's a whole process here. I don't know if it's going to change in the future. I just feel very fortunate to be one of the few who have already gotten their vaccine, but it's a lot more difficult to get it here.
So where do you feel that the con scene is going, and even cosplay is going? Because obviously there's two sides to cosplay. There's all these photo shoots that you're doing, but also, a photo shoot is great, but I want to see cosplay at a con. I
Exactly,
think it's
yeah.
very important because it creates a poor misconception in a lot of ways when you see, just cosplay on Instagram, but you don't see it at a convention. And that it sort of defeats the whole purpose that, well, I have 100 followers and I'm cosplaying as Batman. It creates a weird situation where it needs to be at cons too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been crazy. I really, honestly, I have no idea when cons are gonna come back because as of now, like I mentioned, public events and gatherings are banned at the moment, and there has really been no clue to when it's coming back. The what a lot of organizers are doing right now actually are holding like online conventions. I think that was also popular in the States before everything started going back to normal. But right now, that's what's happening. Everything is done online, like through Discord or through some kind of website and stuff like that, which is still cool, but it's not the same. It definitely isn't. I really miss
Oh,
going to
I
conventions
love it.
and
I think it's the future. I think this is the future. I think online things are the future. I just think that all these people are horrific at marketing. And I think that's the
yeah,
biggest concern is that they are bad at marketing. They haven't cracked the algorithms and they don't understand that. And they also are charging money for these events and they don't understand that you don't charge money for it. You have a free funnel. It's which is what Xbox is doing with E3 that just happened. Halo
yeah.
is going to be a free game to
Hmm.
play because they want you to buy a bunch of shit in the game. It's Forza Horizon 5 and Forza Horizon for the DLC Ultimate Pack was $100, worth every penny. Lego World is the
Yeah,
greatest thing you could play in and drive a car in. But it's the idea that they want Forza Horizon 5 is going to be a free game in
yeah,
November,
that's crazy. That's
which is going
awesome.
to be phenomenal. And if it looks like anything like Forza Horizon 4, it's going to be a no-brainer. It's going to be a no-brainer.
Absolutely.
But I think that's the future. So that's how I feel is that I think the physical con will always be there, but I think all the money is in the digital world, and I think it's going to take three to 5 years to figure that out. And I'm a part of it. I mean, I could tell you that I was doing in a yearly basis for my other show 35 interviews a year at most. In
Wow.
2020, I did 90. So
Oh,
I
that's
did
awesome.
triple of what I was doing the year before. And then this year I am doing probably 150. Um,
Wow, that's
and
awesome, dude.
slaying dragons in which that it's just going on. And then the year after this, in 2022, I want to do 200, which is ludicrous.
It
And
is.
it's very possible. So I think digitalization is where we're at. And so how do you think cosplay is going to respond to that? Because I'm super curious.
I think ultimately it would still be really good. Like right now, how I do cosplay is fully digital, and I've been having like the time of my life. I think I've cosplayed more than I ever had, um, because of like everything moving on to digital. So I agree. I do think there is a huge future with it. I think in the Philippines, though, um, physical conventions were a lot more popular here. Like even non-cosplayers would be attending these like geeky conventions. It was something like to do in the weekends and stuff like that. So I feel like it will make a comeback once it's ready to. But right now, everything is digital. But I would say that like my audience, even for my cosplay work, is a lot of people from like other countries, not even in the Philippines that much. So it's
I mean,
it's it's
I'm an
really cool.
international product, and you probably are too in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So obviously, I mean, we could talk about this for the next hour easily. Have such an interesting discussion about this, but I do want to give you an opportunity to self promote yourself because I know that you have a Facebook page, you have an Instagram, I know you have a Patreon. I don't know what else you have. I think you have some other links up there as well. So where can
Yeah.
people find you? Where can people support you? Where can people check out what you're doing, and all that stuff?
Okay, yay, thank you. So you can find me as at Dinny Grayson on the internet basically. I have all those things that was mentioned, but I also have a coffee store, so you can buy me a coffee and You can also check out my Ko-fi shop. It's where I sell a bunch of digital sets. Starfire will be up by after this month, so you can purchase that if you like. And I also have a YouTube. I stream on Twitch, and I think that's it. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, and on that note, obviously, I've been saying it. I said it all last year. I'm saying it this year. You got to support indie content creators. That includes
Yes.
me. That includes Dinny Grayson. Obviously, I also have Buy Me a Coffee. And I appreciate everybody who just even going beyond any of this. Obviously, I want everybody to go buy you a coffee, subscribe to your Patreon account, go to all your links, follow you on Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff, because it is super important in which that money has to flow in. I'm not, made of money, guys. And neither are you, I'm assuming. And all the
Not
money
at
that
all.
is granted to you goes into building new cosplays
Yeah.
and anything that comes out of that. So if you want cosplays to be built, obviously you have to support indie content creators. If you want podcasts and this to continue, you have to support people who are doing stuff like this because it does make a difference. But I don't want people to go into debt for this. So please, before you go support me, support Dinny, obviously I want everybody here to make sure that you are financially stable. That means make sure, you have your mortgage paid, your rent paid, your electricity, water, food, shelter. If you have a husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, if you have kids, make sure they're okay. If you have an animal, a dog, obviously your dog was barking, my dog's sleeping. Make sure your pet's okay. It's super important to do that and also the other thing I'm going to say is make sure you're good for the next month too before you go and support people. But if you are in a position to support, obviously do that. And even going beyond just buying somebody a coffee, sharing, liking, sending it to somebody, sharing this podcast, liking your Instagram makes a huge difference and doing all that stuff is free. And so there's no excuse anymore not to do that. And if you are in that financial dire situation, sharing is free. And it does make a huge difference. And honestly, I get messages from people. I don't know if you get messages saying, hey, I loved your cosplay, or man, you did a great job with that episode. It makes my day. And it tells me something, and it makes me feel really good. And, that means a lot more than somebody buying me a coffee. So that's all I'm going to say on that. So on that note, I'm going to give you the final word.
Oh, all right. So thank you for everyone for joining us today. This was so much fun. This is the first time I was able to talk to Andrew. So thank you. Your show is amazing. And I am so excited for both of us just to keep doing what we love and keep doing what we do. So thank you to everyone who supported us.
Well, obviously, I'll take the compliment. And on that note, I'm going to walk away because it's a victory for me. And that's a wrap.